If you hate content batching with your entire soul, but you also want to stay consistent with your content, this episode is for you because we're going to dissect exactly how to stay consistent with your content strategy without batching your content for the entire month, because that might be draining for your energy, may actually not be for your human design if you're into that kind of stuff, or you prefer to leverage the current events, the trending news, and maybe even what's going on in the world, but you want to stay consistent. And maybe consistency has been kind of a problem because you're not batching content and you have so many different things that you have going on in your business. So we're going to talk about all of that and how to actually stick to a plan. Now, here's why consistency actually matters. Consistency equals predictability, and predictability equals trust. And as we know, trust equals sales. So when your audience consistently sees you on social media, whether it directly translates to sales or not, because chances are you have other sales generating activities and assets like your email list, maybe you have some automated funnels, maybe you have your YouTube channel that has a bunch of ranking videos that are bringing you a ton of traffic, but you know that when you show up on social media, your sales possibly double because people remember who you are, they possibly sign up to your email list, they go to your YouTube channel. You know how social media works. So when your audience knows that you are consistent, when you are predictable as a leader, they trust you more and they buy more from you. Now, what can you actually do when it comes to planning your content if you hate batching for the entire month? Now, I'm sure you've heard these creators who say, let me show you how to create a month of content in 15 minutes using AI. Let me show you how to create 30 days of content in just an hour. Personally, that gives me an ick. Yes, you can use AI to create content, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be high quality content. If you are a coach or a service provider, what's going to really separate you from everybody else is the specificity in your content, is you being able to read your audience's mind, what's happening with them right this moment. Not 2 months ago, not 6 months ago, and not even last year. Because if you go to an AI like Claude, for example, it's not actually in this year, at least as of the recording of this video. I've used Claude to compare it with ChatGPT. Now, I do personally like Claude better for writing, but I still like my own writing way better because I have my own accent, I have the unique words that I use. Do I use AI occasionally to help me out a little bit? Yeah, but I also notice a massive spike in engagement and interaction, specifically comments wise and direct messaging wise, when I write content literally just by myself. So if you are a coach and you're building a personal brand, don't forget that people are going to connect with you rather than with an AI. Now, so there's a couple of things that I teach when it comes to content strategy and when it comes to content planning. If you do not like planning for an entire month, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to sit down and record all 30 videos for Instagram or for your Facebook or for your YouTube shorts. You want to have a rough outline. That's where I would start originally. So have a rough outline, have the topics that you're going to potentially create for the next 30 days. And you also want to keep in mind, do you have a launch coming up? Do you have any masterclass or paid program, or do you promote your one-on-one services for the entire month? What is your offer that you're promoting? Because that's going to dictate the content that you create. Now, the other thing that you want to look at, is there any major events that you can leverage? For example, it could be Grammys, because maybe you're going to want to create a couple of memes and drive some traffic to your page this way and leverage the current trending events. I've done memes on Instagram over the years and they performed incredibly well in terms of traffic and followers. It's a great strategy to leverage those kinds of events. So it is something that you cannot really batch. You literally have to wait for the event to happen. And the next day, the next morning, you create the posts in real time and you publish them right away. So you need to leave the empty spaces in your calendar to be able to do that kind of stuff. So besides your main offer, besides your launch or any sort of promotion that you're doing for the month and the events, the next thing that I want you to have in place that's going to make content creation so much easier is to have a running list of ideas, aka your content bank. So you can either have just the ideas, like the rough ideas that you write. I personally keep them in my notes app. I recently just went to get my hair done today, as of when I'm recording this video, this podcast episode. And after spending almost 5 hours in the salon, I wrote a bunch of content ideas. I outlined several podcast episodes. So that has been my time to do that. So I was doing that on the go in my notes app. And every single time I go into it, I have about 500 ideas at any given point that I can look at. And then if I don't have anything to say today, which usually I have a lot to say, then I take one of the ideas and I publish that, whether it is an Instagram carousel, whether it is a long form written Facebook post, whether it's a thread. There's always something that I can go and grab. Now, the other thing that I want you to understand about your content, speaking of the trending events that you can leverage inside of your content strategy, or anything that's currently going on in your industry. For example, if you are a coach or service provider or course creator, if you know what I mean, in the beginning of 2026, where everybody and their dog was talking about Jenna Kutcher pausing her podcast and Amy Porterfield retiring her digital course academy. So you want to leave space for things like that if you want to contribute your opinion on the subject matter. So you're essentially going to be leveraging the current events, whether it's global events or niche events, like what I mentioned about Jenna and Amy Porterfield. And you're going to have your evergreen topics that you can always publish, regardless of the politics, outside weather, the state of social media, the state of your industry. You're always going to have the evergreen topics that are going to be always relevant. Now, when it comes to content batching and content planning specifically, you always start with the planning. Have a content calendar that you're going to stick to. I don't care what you use. You can use Airtable, you can use Notion. I personally use Notion, so I have everything at a glance. I can open up the month and I can see what's going on. Put your launches first, then add the industry events, and be flexible, because when you batch everything and when you have the set in stone content calendar for the month, there's not much room for flexibility. So you're kind of being very stiff about it. I want you to be more flexible, because if you are that kind of free bird and you have certain times when you want to say certain things, maybe you have a big milestone that you want to share. Maybe something happened in your life that you want to talk about, whether it is a trip, whether it is a huge award, or you're speaking on stage, or there's anything major happening that you want to maybe slightly brag about and then tie it into some sort of lesson in your business. And then once you start planning your content, once you have a rough plan for your month, and you have the topics planted in every single day, and you know how often you're posting for every single platform, if you are showing up on multiple, if you're just showing up on Instagram, for example, Instagram and maybe YouTube, you have your weekly YouTube videos that you can batch for 2 weeks at a time, you can batch for 4 weeks at a time, depending on your strategy for YouTube. If you are leveraging the current events, then you maybe will want to batch for just 2 weeks at a time. And then again, if you batch 2 videos for the next 2 weeks, but then something happens in the industry and you really want to talk about it, you want to jump on that trending news, then maybe the video 1 or video 2 is going to be pushed back in the content calendar. So that way you can capitalize on the events and say whatever it is needs to be said to your audience. Now, once you actually sit down to batch the videos or to batch create the carousels or batch write, maybe you just have a bucket of time once a week or twice a week when you just sit down and write, and you have that spark of creativity and you write your posts. Maybe you write 3 or 5 posts at a time, but you're not necessarily going to publish them all at once unless you want to publish at least one of them. You're not going to just go and spam your profile with 5 different posts. So you'll have those posts ready, and then you literally can just plug and play them into your content calendar. If you are batching something like videos and they are evergreen topics, you probably can batch 4, 5, maybe 8 at a time, depending on your capacity, and then you put them into your calendar where they need to be. And then again, keep your content calendar flexible because of the strategies that we've talked about previously. Now, one extra thing that I wanted to cover for women, so if you are a man, you're probably going to want to skip through this part, If you're a woman who uses your cycle as a strategy in your business, if you are, for example, 1 week you may be taking a week off when you do not feel like creating, when you do not feel like showing up on video, you just want to lay down and eat ice cream, if you know what I mean, and you only use maybe 2 weeks to create your content. So in that case, for weeks like that, you kind of do want to have something already ready, unless that's going to be the week when you just publish carousels or where you just publish stories, however that looks like in your business. For me, I pretty much show up whenever. I am okay with getting on camera. I'm good with speaking in front of the camera majority of the times, but I also do always have a couple of extra videos in my Instagram Edits app. So whenever I record videos, whenever I batch videos, I immediately drop them there so I know they're there and I can go ahead and edit them. Otherwise, if I don't put them in the video editor immediately, I just forget that I even recorded them, because that happens before as well. Which is why I said it's really important to have a running list of ideas, aka your content bank, so you know what you're creating, and then also put it in your video editor. That's a little hack that I've done for the past year, and it really forced me to not only edit videos, but also publish them and not forget about the fact that I recorded them. Now, so far we've covered how to plan your content, how to batch your content, how to always have a content bank, a running list of ideas that you can fill in at any given point, that you can always access on the go, when you're on the plane, when you're traveling, when you're at the hair salon, whenever you're without Wi-Fi, even when you can just sit down and quickly write. And I don't want you to put too much pressure on yourself when it comes to batching, because batching doesn't have to be for an entire month. You don't have to carve out an entire week to plan your content and batch your content. You just need to know, what is my rough agenda for the month? What am I promoting? How often am I publishing? What types of content and what formats of content am I publishing? And then realistically look, okay, so if I am only posting 2 Instagram reels per week, then you only need to record 8 videos. So if you even batch for a week ahead, you only need to record 2 videos. It's not that hard. And then the rest of the content, if it's carousels, you sit down and create all of them, or however that looks like. For me, if I'm in the mood to sit down and write, I sit down and just literally write, and that's all I'm doing. If I'm in the mood to create graphics and I have that graphic design creativity spark, then I sit down and create a bunch of graphics and I have them ready, because for me, carousels is something that takes the longest. Videos is very easy for me to record, so you get to choose whatever is going to be easiest for you to create and lean into that. And last but certainly not least, do not put too much pressure on yourself. You do not have to record 20 videos in a single day. You do not have to plan your entire month. You need to have an agenda for every single month and then work backwards, and then essentially reverse engineer your content strategy based on what you're promoting, based on the events, based on the state of the industry, and then any kind of extra milestones that you can share throughout the month, you can also add them in. For me personally, what I do is I batch the content for a week in advance, because given that I'm a content strategist and I talk a lot about social media, sometimes there are social media news that I want to cover, that I email my list about, or I create a specific post about. So of course, it's something that I want to prioritize before my evergreen content topics. So I hope after this episode you feel more at peace when it comes to content batching. You're not feeling as pressured by all the gurus and experts who tell you that you need to batch for the next 3 months or create 12 months of content in a day. Do not feel that kind of pressure. Just follow the steps that I've outlined in this episode, and your strategy is going to be good to go. Now, if you want my eyes on your content strategy, if you want my support with building your content strategy, helping you outline the hooks, the videos, the carousels, building out the entire strategy, building out possibly the launch strategy, maybe you have an event coming up and you want to build the strategy for it, then I'm going to leave links down below to work with me. Go ahead and check them out, and I cannot wait to see the content that you create. If you would like to connect more on the social media, then find me on Instagram at Yelena Ostrovska. I'm going to drop my username down below, but if you want to search for it, it's at Yelena Ostrovska with J, and I cannot wait to see your content strategy come to life.